Hello, everyone. My name is Gregory, and this is The View from Out Here. Right now, I'm somewhat preoccupied with whether President Joe Biden is going to step down or not, and it's bringing back memories of presidential campaigns from days gone by. When I was coming up, back when they were still working on a prototype for dirt, the Democratic and Republican national conventions were exciting stuff, seriously. Back then, the presidential race didn't start in the middle of a sitting president's term. The nominees for president were decided at the conventions. These folks had about 4 months to state their case to the American people instead of the 2 years that we have now. The big three TV networks used to cover the entire convention from gavel to gavel, even during the day, because that was when the two parties actually selected their nominees. Nowadays, it's all sewn up by the time they even get to the conventions. Now it's more like a 4-day public relations orgasm. I'm a Democrat by default. If you believe those political questionnaires on the internet, I'm actually a Democratic socialist. But really, I'm a Democrat only because I'm not a Republican. Hell, I can't even tell you what a Republican is anymore. I just watched the interview with George Stephanopoulos rolling up on President Joe Biden. It was practically a drive-by, for heaven's sake. Stephanopoulos was almost brutal in his confrontation of the president about his fitness to continue. As you might expect, the first question was about his performance at the debate. President Biden was like, yeah, through a laugh, accompanied by his signature confidently toothy grin. It was pretty clear that his intent was to blow it off like it was nothing. Things didn't get better during the interview as the interview continued either. It was notable that Stephanopoulos and the president were having two different conversations. The president was reinterpreting all the questions to be about his political accomplishments, which are pretty considerable, while Stephanopoulos was asking about his age and physical condition. He had to keep bringing the president back around to the actual questions that he was asking. At one point, Uncle Joe said that he hadn't watched a replay of the debate, and then not 2 minutes later, he was talking about how many lies Trump told and talking about some of the individual lies he did tell. Did he watch it, or did he not remember that he watched it? It was unnerving to see the president take such a desperately defensive posture. The president's performance in this interview was better than the debate, of course, but certainly not very reassuring. At the end, Stephanopoulos was unable to break through what was clearly Biden's denial about his age and physical condition. Uncle Joe is too old to be president. You might remember that he said so himself when he was running in 2020. We can't unsee what we saw at that debate, and that wasn't an isolated incident. He was right when he said that he would be a one-term president because he would be too old to consider a second term. A lot of us were worried about him when he was running in 2020, and he even mentioned that in this interview. But then Donald Trump decided not to accept the results of the election and has been running against President Biden since before he was even sworn in. Trump is dealing with a truckload of denial of his own about his mental fitness for office. He keeps having himself tested and telling us the results. And I'm not the only one who has noticed that he hasn't released the results of any of those cognitive tests. Come to think of it, no one has seen a credible report on his physical condition or his taxes, for that matter. And if I hear one more pundit bringing up Barack Obama's one bad night when he was running, I think I'm going to lose it. Comparing the two is absurd. Barack Obama was half Biden's age when he had his one bad night. And it wasn't because everybody was already worried about his age either. In Uncle Joe's case, it wasn't one bad night. He is a very old man, and I'm not talking about his number of years now. I'm talking about his visible physical condition and his ability to speak in understandable sentences, like me, for example. It's been more like a bad year, and the Democratic Party knows it. Some Democrats in Washington are even working in the background to stage an intervention on the guy. Don't get me wrong here. I'm voting against Donald Trump in this election. If the Democrats want to put up a ham sandwich as their nominee, I'm voting for the ham sandwich. But I'd much prefer to be voting for someone who will actually be living in the future that we're trying to build here. I don't exactly have a ton of confidence that there will even be a Joe Biden 4 years from now. Uncle Joe has done a masterful job at being president. I'm not arguing that. He has exceeded expectations by a good measure, which the White House reminds us at every press briefing several times a day. The infrastructure bill, student loan forgiveness, rebuilding the strongest post-COVID economy in the entire free world, coming up with the most extensive bipartisan plan so far for securing the southern border, not to mention all that he has accomplished in expanding and strengthening NATO. He beat a sitting president out of a second term in office, which is itself a pretty steep climb. It's all pretty amazing stuff. But the insurmountable fact is that Uncle Joe is not going to get younger or more vital during a second term in office. He can barely walk already, for crying out loud. This is embarrassing. Last week I asked, how much is enough to ask of this guy? And that question is still on the table. While the Democratic Party is falling all over themselves trying to slap a Band-Aid on what we all saw last Thursday, one liberal pundit asked a question that I don't think got nearly the consideration it deserves. It kind of got lost in the shuffle of gaslighting about Uncle Joe's fitness to continue to serve as president. The pundit asked, why isn't the Republican Party pressuring Donald Trump to step down as well? I think that's a good question. Donald Trump is facing 3 more criminal indictments, totaling dozens of felony charges that are still standing, and there is a credible possibility that he will be in jail on election day. All that after being tried and convicted of 34 felonies already. Why isn't the Republican Party pressuring him to step down? The answer is pretty clear. The Republican Party doesn't exist anymore. It has been replaced in its entirety by an authoritarian, anti-democratic, quasi-Christian megacult, a daddy state headed by a mentally ill, megalomaniacal, rapidly aging crime boss who is showing clear and visible signs of dementia. I guess you'd have to be getting on in years to conceptualize just how insane this whole situation really is. Honestly, my head is spinning. Even by today's standards, this isn't normal. These Republican lawmakers who think of themselves as being sane, patriotic Americans, who insist that they're not one of those people, may not be angry, victimized, racist, authoritarian, anti-democratic schoolyard bullies themselves, but they uniformly, let me say that again, uniformly they support a cult leader who is. And at the end of the day, what's the difference? I want to thank you for hanging with me so far. And if you're finding anything of value here, please take a moment to like and subscribe with the buttons below. And please don't forget about either of my books either. Basic Video Production, Everything You Need to Know to Make Video Like a Professional, and my childhood memoir, Searching for Saint Germain. At the very least, it's a good story. Both are available now, and you won't be disappointed by either of them. You'll see. You'll find links to both of those in the description below as well. Meanwhile, my name is Gregory, and this has been The View from Out Here. Much love.
Well, it's almost summer.